Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week I'll be talking about an anime that has so much legacy and so much impact in everything we watch nowadays that, it doesn't need any more introductions. I'm talking about Sailor Moon, but following the theme of this season, I'm talking about Sailor Moon because I want to introduce the Mahou Shoujo genre, or the magical girl as some know it. Also because the next week I will be talking about another type, but let's just say this week I'll be talking about the classical Mahou Shoujo style of anime. And what is better than the one that put it on the map? Sailor Moon is and will always be the Mahou Shoujo reference for everyone and everything we ever see. Anyways, before I even start rambling about it, let's first get to the disclaimers. The disclaimer number one, spoiler alert, although, it's Sailor Moon at this point. If you didn't watch it, I would suggest you watch it just because, it is a piece of history, more or less. And also because, it's not that bad. I'll talk more about it in the review, but anyways. Second disclaimer, I'll be talking about the first anime from 1992. So none of the remakes. I think there are, from what I remember, 3 remakes. The original one, the first remake from the early 2000s, I think. And the remake they did back in the 2010s. I could be wrong about that. I don't actually remember the factuality of that, but that's not the point. The thing is, I'm talking about the original one. The third disclaimer, and this is a thing really more to me than really to the show, but at some point to the show also. I'll be talking about just the first season of Sailor Moon, and not the full show. So the original one has 46 episodes, I think, plus the movie, but the movie doesn't actually count. I don't think it is canon, but anyways, I'll be talking about just the first 13 episodes, which marks the first arc, which is the let's say the passing of the first main villain. Because first off, I cannot, as my current setup to do this podcast, I cannot afford 46 episodes of any anime, mainly in this time of year, beginning of the year, because I'm kind of crunch at work, so let's just say I could not do it. So in order to get review out and introduce mostly the genre, I thought the first arc is good enough because it shows already a whole lot of the hallmarks of the genre either way. And also because, if I'm being honest, next week's show is more or less my target, really. So I will get to that, but I went into Sailor Moon with no expectations really, and let's just say it's kind of rough, but it's from 92. What do you expect? So anyways, before I even start with the story, let's get into the stats. So this series has a lot of stats, so I will just talk about the manga and the anime, because let's just say there's a lot of things here. So first off, right, Sailor Moon was originally a manga written by Takeuchi Naoko, published by Kodansha. The original run was from December 1991 to February 1997. It has 52 chapters. I don't know how many volumes, but anyways, the anime had the first, let's say the first adaptation in 1992 to 1997. So more or less following the manga. The first anime has 46 episodes, as I already said, and then the remake was from 2014. According to Wikipedia, it started in 2014 and then in 2016. The name of the remake was Sailor Moon Crystal. From what I gather, the adaptation is more or less the same, but they used more of the source material rather than adapting a lot of things. From what I can gather, it was because they more or less adapted things for not only the international market, but Japanese market in itself. So there are things in the manga that could not be shown on TV. From what I gather, I cannot confirm this at this point, but anyways, and that's basically the stats. So Sailor Moon is basically an ever-living entity in the anime and manga, so you can see its influences in everything nowadays, more or less. So many of the gags, some of the tropes really were born in Sailor Moon. Something like the girl running late, saying Chikoku with the toes on her mouth, and the other things that came from Sailor Moon, they actually came from here. And not only that, but a whole lot of other stuff that came from it, from story basis, a whole lot of not only, let's say, the structure of anime and structure of episodes, storytelling more or less. So you can clearly see, and I'm talking about in broad strokes here, but if you watch it, you can clearly see some newer anime that you watch it, and you can clearly point out that, yeah, this came from here, this came from here, this came from here, and that's really nice. I mean, it is, at the end of the day, for me at the very least, it is a historical analysis of a piece, let's say. It is really fun to me to see how things evolved into the things we have today, and to see the basis where they evolved from. So, coming back for a moment, when I did season 1 of the show, of the podcast, I talked a lot, and I mean a lot, about Symphogear. And for better or for worse, Symphogear is a Mahou Shoujo show. And I'm not saying I like Symphogear just because of Mahou Shoujo. No, that's not it. But seeing this Sailor Moon, I really came back to Symphogear. Really came back to a whole lot of other Mahou Shoujo shows, that one that I will eventually talk about, some that I would prefer not to talk about, and some that we'll see about it. But the thing is, right, so Mahou Shoujo is a real genre. It has its hallmarks, and this is where it was born. So just briefly to talk about the story, right, as I already told you, I'm kind of crunched for time. I don't want to make a shallow review, but at the same time, let's get going before I start rambling again. The thing is, so the story. So, for one reason or another, at some point in her life, let's start again. So, at some point, we are in Tokyo, and we find our main protagonist, Tsukino Usagi. That is the titular protagonist, really. And for one reason or another, she befriends a cat which has a moon in her forehead. The cat talks, and after some bantering, for some reason, Usagi gets this medallion pendant. You know what I mean? The let's say, her focus, her symbol, and for one reason or another becomes she becomes a Sailor Warrior, I think, what they say in the anime. She becomes Sailor Moon, and her mission is to fight the Yoma Kingdom Empire. They're basically aliens slash demons that come around to Earth to steal human life energy in order to revive their king, their ruler. And for the first arc, right, we see that Usagi starts out as a crybaby. She cries a lot, and I mean it. I'm not being sarcastic or anything, and not exaggerating. She cries a lot overall, and let me just say, it becomes kind of tedious after a while. So basically, she fights Yomas in order to protect humanity, and for the most part, that's basically it. Eventually, we get to meet another Sailor Soldier, Sailor Guardians. I don't actually remember. So we then get to meet at the end of the first arc both Sailor Mercury and Sailor Mars, and then we at the second arc we get to see Sailor Pluto, and then Sailor Uranus and Neptune, and Sailor Saturn eventually too. That's more or less it for the story. So let me talk about a bit of the episode structure, just a tiny bit. So the first season is pretty rough. It is pretty episodic. I mean, the only plot development really that happens is, I think, on episode 10. That's when Sailor Mercury enters the picture, and I think it's episode 10, but it is really late at that point. Before that, we have episodic happenings in the city. So, for one reason or another, the main character that is called Jedaito, Jade. I don't actually know his name in English, but Jedaito. He is the main lackey of the queen of the Yomas, and so his mission is to steal life energy from humans in order to revive their ruler. And so every episode he comes up with a scheme of getting desire from people so he can steal their life energy. So, for instance, the first one of the first episodes is about people desiring to buy. Not only people, right? They really focus on women for the most part. And this is factual, right? I'm not exaggerating here. They really focus on women for the most part. Men are really counted, so there are like four men that really appear in the anime. That is I don't actually remember his name, but it is the Onisan for Usagi, who works at the arcade. That is her crush, more or less. Tuxedo Mask or Tuxedo Kame, who is the main guy around the memes from the normie memes from the show. And eventually, for the most part, he helps in combat. Sometimes he throws one rose, gets someone distracted, and that helps turn around the fight. That is the basic formula of any combat in the first season. And then outside of those two, there is Usagi's father and Usagi's little brother. That's about it. Any other mention of men is Umino, who is one of Usagi's classmates, who has a crush on her. And from then on, just extras. Outside from that, getting back to the schemes. So each scheme is different, but mostly they pop up really just nonchalantly. Like, oh, there's this jewelry store around the block that's selling things really, really cheap, and then people start buying it, and for some reason the jewels can absorb energy from people, and from then on we eventually see a gym, a clock store, because the clocks make people stressed and steal their energy for some reason, and there's a lot of it. There's a fortune teller episode. There's music episode. The music episode is a bit different. It's at the point that the anime kind of begins to change in order to actually introduce Sailor Mercury. But the thing is, right? So every episode is a different, let's say, villain, a different Yoma that appears, and a different scheme. There's one where they want to become idols and so on and so forth. That's the basic deal. So after some point, Sailor Mercury is introduced because she's in one episode where they are trying to steal energy from people going to cram schools because they are geniuses and whatever, because I don't know, man. And then the following episode, they find Sailor Mars, who is Miko priestess in a shrine, and for some reason Jedaito disguises himself as staying helper and living helper, right? And he sells these let's say these amulets which draw energy from people and whatever. Basically the anime is pretty boring. But before I get to my opinion, let's just expand on the Mahou Shoujo theme genre before I get to the part where I bash this anime. So, for the most part, what are the parts that define a Mahou Shoujo anime? And this is kind of different from time to time, but the basic, the framework's there. So, in most cases, your protagonist will be a cute girl, generally from middle school to I don't actually know how this works in English when you say it, but anyways, from middle school to high school, generally. I think there are cases where the person's already an adult, but those are rare. Let's just say in general terms. So the girl is generally a middle schooler or a high schooler. Really, they're generally, let's say, cutesy in the way that they're fragile, they have dreams, they are idealistic. Other things and physical features are, let's say, optional. So the gluten, where they eat a lot, the being dense, being kind of an airhead, that's optional, right? But the idealistic, the optimistic is debatable, but the thing is, right, so the template for the Mahou Shoujo protagonist is out there already. If you watch like 2 of them, you see what I'm talking about. And then we get to the framework of the anime. So first off, we need to get a cute mascot that talks. There are no Mahou Shoujo mascots that don't talk, they all talk. They are generally either small animals or in some cases they are formless, let's say, creatures, or they are like I don't know, a rab. The one I'm thinking about right now is not really let's say a normal Mahou Shoujo, but let's just say he's the head of a bunny. But anyways, the thing is, you have to have your mascot, which is let's say the one that introduces the girl to the concept of being a magical girl and introducing them to the concept of saving lives or saving people or saving the world and having the mission and whatever. Most times the powers are mostly the same, and also the design is pretty similar in some cases. A lot of them you see full of ribbons, and I'm talking about this like this is a formula, but it is something like it happens casual. How can I say it? It happens so much that you start to build this relationship between the things. So the uniforms are in general full of ribbons. Red to pink is generally the main girl's attire, with the main color also, or the highlights would be in white. So pink, red, white. In the case of Sailor Moon, there's a big presence of blue because of the sailor uniform, but that depends. But I'm just spitballing here. From this point on, as I already said, the mascot is the one that introduces the concept and the powers around. Then on, we have the introduction of more magical girls. This eventually happens after, I don't know, some development from the main character, because the main character always starts as really immature, really scared about the fighting, really scared about the powers. In some cases, they don't actually know how to control their powers, or they don't actually know what they are doing actually, because they are fighting, but they don't actually know the purpose of it. And eventually we get the introduction of more magical girls. Let's just say that in some cases, talking about specifically the classical magical girl, classical Mahou Shoujo, the introduction of more magical girls is generally meant as adding allies to the cause. So they eventually become a big group that fight evil and whatever. Next week we'll talk about this, because next week's a bit more, let's say, morally ambiguous, but that's not to say about right now. Anyway, so from this point on, right? So we get so we talk about the main character, the mascot, the allies, the more magical girls, because that's the thing, right? There's never, and I can say this with confidence, there's never only one, because there are 7 billion people in the world. There's no way there's only one heroine around the whole world. That being said, what else do I need to talk about really in this formula? So the idealistic, generally you see that a lot of the conflicts that happen, let's say the inside conflicts that happen, is due to the pessimistic outlook in life from the protagonist or other girls, and this generally lights up the next part, where they talk a lot about the power of love, the power of friendship, that joke that we all say that maybe the prize was the friends that we made along the way. Mahou Shoujo is that phrase in a nutshell, and that's more or less it about the show. And this is a thing, right? For classical Mahou Shoujo in general, and this is like 90% of the cases, there's no killing, there's no death, rarely there's blood. Action scenes don't actually revolve around really action. You will see that in most cases the animation is kind of rough in general, because I don't know, man, they don't actually want to show action shoujo anime. I don't know why, but anyways, that's not the point. The thing is, right, so there's generally not many killing. There's nothing really. It's really sanitized in a way. It's really family friendly. It is for kids for the most part. So that's basically it, right? So the template for classical Mahou Shoujo is basically that. It is really family friendly, really light action, just idealistic, fight the bad guys. At some points in watching the anime, I actually thought, oh, this is tokusatsu, but for girls. In a way, I think that's diminutive, but at the same time, it kind of feels like it. I mean, the transformation scenes are iconic, and I can't really describe it well, but the thing is, right, the transformation scene is just iconic. One of the things that happened a lot after Sailor Moon is that the transformation scenes became more commonplace, let's say, and it became commonplace so much that I have to actually mention this. Going way back in the podcast, Kill la Kill was made as a not a parody, but as a satire to the Mahou Shoujo. So, in a way, you could say that Kill la Kill's Mahou Shoujo anime really kinda. That's a stretch. I'm mostly joking, but if we are, let's say, form radical, we could say that yes, Kill la Kill is a Mahou Shoujo anime. That being said, I'm not talking about Kill la Kill. Anyway, so that's the template. Let's talk about my opinion, because at this point I will just start repeating myself. The anime is pretty rough. It's kind of bad, really, to watch. And why do I say that? Because the animation is kind of pretty bad, and I want to believe it was because they had technological limitation given the year it was done, because some of the things that happen are just terrible. They don't actually nowadays we see animation so much as I would not say it is easy, but you could say that even an anime that is badly animated, it's not really as bad as this one. So they cut a lot of frames. There are some things that happen, like people going downstairs and stuff that just feels rough. People appearing in frames that don't actually enter the frame moving. They just appear out of nowhere. They don't even slide, because it would seem really bad, but they just appear out of nowhere. And for the most part, the animation is pretty bad. Talking about now, the story for the first season is pretty bad. I think at the 4th or 5th episode, after I noticed that it would be just episodic stuff until something happened, oh my god, it was worse than Strawberry Panic. I just thought, oh my god, I just want to jump to the next thing that's happened. Because at some point, you know what's going to happen. Something happens with one of Usagi's friends. Usagi finds out, goes there, investigates, sees that there's a Yoma, transforms, talks a bit. The Yoma almost wins the fight. Tuxedo Mask throws a rose at something and saves Usagi. And then Usagi just uses the tiara to defeat the guy. And that's it. That's basically it. The whole first season is basically it. Until some point where they want to start to change. But the thing is, it's pretty bad. So, aside from that, from that point on, that's about the animation and the story that I want to talk about. The one thing that I really want to say, there are two things actually. The first one is the music. God damn it, the music's good. It's good. It is my type of music. It has that city pop, 80s to 90s vibe to it. It is really nice. I really liked, and at some point, actually, the aesthetics of it. I really liked the early 90s anime aesthetic for some reason. I don't actually know the name of it. I think there's a name for the style, but easy to say, really nice style. The other thing is about the time capsule element to it. So, and this is a thing, right? So it is so early 90s. They talk about so much stuff that we don't talk about anymore. Seeing they using tapes to listen to music, floppy disks to use a computer. The notion of not knowing how to use a computer for a 14-year-old, it's such a wild ride in some cases. I was like, oh my god, this is not even close. There's no mention of cell phones at any point in the first season, at the very least. It is something. It's outstanding. I think it's really interesting to see something like that. The one tidbit I wanted to really touch on, just as a curiosity, in one of the frames they show Usagi's father and mother sleeping, and they sleep in separate beds. That was wild, and I don't actually know why they did that, but I just thought, yeah, this is 90s. This is 90s Japan for some reason. I don't know, just a detail I caught. Whatever. So, again, before I start rambling, that's about it. I think that at the very least, I explained. I don't actually know if it came out really, let's say, with clarity, but I basically explained the classical Mahou Shoujo template for you. And next week I will discuss how things change around from the early 90s to the mid 2010s, early 2010s, I think. And well, this is going to be next week. Anyways, next episode. I don't actually do these things week to week, but anyways. So that's about it. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, if you like what I do, please share, please follow, please subscribe, depending on the platform you're in. Please join the Discord. If you can share with a friend, you know, the whole thing. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.